If you clicked on this video because you want to know who these people are and why we might have to worry about this kid, then keep watching because those answers are coming up quick. But if you're hoping to learn how to build the finest looking Pikler Triangle with access to detailed plans and the most thorough build explanation YouTube has to offer, then keep watching because I have all of that coming up and more. But first, let's find out what brought us here in the first place. I'm here with my longtime friend Luna, and it looks like you brought a co-pilot with you. Who is this?
This is Quincy.
Quincy, that is a solid name. A lot of good Quincy's out there, I know this. So what brings you to my home today?
Him. So he will be turning 1 very shortly. I wanted you to build his first birthday present.
Sounds like pressure.
Possibly, but I think you can do it.
All right, what are we talking about here?
A Pikler Triangle.
And I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
It is a climbing apparatus. It has 2 ladders, sort of one on each side. It allows him to climb and test his balance and develop his strength.
I'm gonna have to look into this Pikler Triangle, but whatever it is, if it's made of wood, I'm up for the challenge. By building this, we're hoping that this is gonna help him develop his motor skills because he's gonna climb on, because toddlers like to climb on things.
Yes, but that way we can control it a little bit better instead of climbing all over everything else.
All right, well, if it keeps one kid off the streets, then I'm willing to do it.
Perfect.
All righty. Well, Quincy, Pikler Triangle it is. So I got to work on this Pikler Triangle by first purchasing all of the wood. I decided to build the stringers out of maple with walnut racing stripes. This Pikler Triangle will need 13 dowels, not the 8 you see here. I had to go to 3 different Home Depots to get all of them. Supply chain mumbo jumbo, I guess. I don't know. If you are wondering why I would make this toddler's toy out of hardwood and not the typical plywood or pine, then let me explain. You see, I did some in-depth research on the history of Pikler Triangles and early child development. In fact, I consulted with the SRDC, which is the Society for Research and Child Development. With their help, I learned that there have been quite a few notable individuals who were reared as a toddler climbing on Pikler Triangles. Some of them include Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Nancy Pelosi, Hitler and Stalin, Hans Gruber, Darth Vader, Biff Tannen, Jaws, that one guy from The Bachelorette, and Caillou. What do all of these people have in common, you ask? They are all evil, and they were all raised on Pikler Triangles made of pine or plywood. So hardwood it is. No one ever grew up to be a supervillain who was raised on a Pikler Triangle made of hardwood. Luna had also mentioned to me that she wanted this to be a nice furniture piece in her main room, so I needed to give it a little extra flair. I decided that extra flair should be some walnut racing stripes right down the side of each of the stringers. So I ripped down some 1/4-inch pieces of walnut. Once I had all the maple and walnut pieces ripped to a combined width of 4 inches for each stringer, I glued them up cutting board style in my Bessie bar clamps and DeWalt trigger clamps. After running them all through my Primo DeWalt planer to make them all the same thickness and get rid of the remaining glue, I noticed there were a few imperfections in my craftsmanship. Now I should have used a feather board to prevent this, but with a little bit of glue and magic walnut dust, I can make all these problems go away. Just follow up with some light sanding and voila, it's like it never happened. Now I have 4 stringers, and 2 of them need to be 44 inches long, and the other 2 need to be 37 inches long. To create those traditional rounded ends of a Pikler Triangle stringer, I used the obvious cocktail peanuts jar. And once I had my curved outlines just right, I took it over to my 17-inch Grizzly bandsaw to make a rough cut. Then I took it over to my rigid oscillating edge belt sander to get that final smooth shape. With a speed square, I marked at 2 inches, which is right in the middle of all of the stringers. At the top of each stringer, I marked at 2 inches. Then I marked every 6 inches for all of the crossbar dowels. I strategically chose a 1 1/4 inch diameter dowel because I really felt like it gave it the right look and also seemed like the appropriate thickness for the grip of a toddler. So with that in mind, I used a 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit to drill holes in each of those marks along the stringers. To make the triangle braces, I first needed to make a perfect triangle template, all angles at 60 degrees. Creating a triangle template like this allows me to make each of the triangle braces identical. I cut pieces of maple bigger than the size of the triangle, that way I could cut it down to size. I panel glued them together and then ran them through the planer. And I ran it through many times. Of course, I couldn't make it easy on myself, so I made the triangle braces thinner than the stringers. After looking at multiple Pikler triangles, I found that the overall aesthetic appeal would look better if the braces weren't as bulky. It's a minor detail that I wanted to add. Typically, this is not recommended because it makes the hardware more complicated. More on that later. Securing the template to the maple panels was easy by using painter's tape, CA glue, and an accelerator. If you are interested in any of the tools and products that I use anywhere in this video, then click on the video description below, where I will leave Amazon affiliate links so you can purchase them. This is a way to support Dude Sawdust because we receive a small commission at no extra charge to you. After letting the CA glue cure on the triangle braces for about 20 seconds, it was ready for a trimming on the bandsaw, making sure to come close to the line, but not too close. Then I took it over to my Bosch router setup with a flush trim bit to take off any excess maple left over from the bandsaw. The top bearing of the flush trim bit allows it to stay within the shape of the template for both of the triangle braces, making them identical. One of the questions that racked my brain was how wide or long should the ladder dowels be? The dowels come in 48 inches, but most Pikler Triangle dowel lengths are 36 inches at the widest and 30 inches at the most narrow. I wasn't happy with any of these, and I came to the conclusion that 34 inches is the sweet spot for being structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing. With most everything cut out, I gave all of them a thorough sanding of 120, 150, and 220 grit to arrive to that smooth and subtle touch. And yes, I hate sanding too, just like you. If you are planning on building your own Pikler Triangle, then pay close attention to all the explanations in regards to anything hardware related, including the drilling of pilot holes, because you won't find a more helpful source on YouTube. Just saying. And later on, I'll show you detailed plans you can just snapshot with your phone and have everything you need right there. Most people connect their triangle braces with screws, and that's a great option. I chose to use 3/8 inch dowels. It looks better and it gives connecting support between the two panels that I connected with only glue. You'll understand more clearly when you see me gluing everything together. So I simply drilled with a 3/8 inch bit for the dowels, but not all the way through, just enough for about half of the dowel. The pivot point connecting bolt is a size M8 and requires a 5/16 drill bit. I drilled the 5/16 bit completely through. The hole that you see in my template for the locking knob bolt that will screw into a threaded insert that will be in the stringer was drilled too large at 7/16 of an inch. So I had to try and center the best I could the correct pilot hole of 5/16 inch. One of my previous video commenters, Adam Chessis, introduced me to dowel centers. I was thoroughly impressed with the concept, but the dowel centers that I purchased were less than impressive. Needless to say, they still got the job done. The problem was the 3/8 inch size didn't perfectly fit in the 3/8 inch drilled hole. If I were to force them in, they would have no doubt cracked the wood. And even if I was able to force them in, then good luck getting them out. So I just let them sit proud and I was still able to use them effectively. One little mistake that I made. One of the 3/8 inch dowel pilot holes lined up where the larger dowels were located, so I had to re-drill a hole in the triangle brace about an inch over. Fortunately, this was no big deal since these holes will be hidden. Once the dowel centers were properly placed, then I could line up the stringer with the triangle brace and press firmly. The dents created let me know exactly where to drill. Now I'm only putting dowels in the longer of the two stringers, so I drilled two 3/8 inch pilot holes in each of them, but remember, not all the way through. You see, the dowels that I used are too long for the thickness of the board, so I cut them in half and then glued the longer stringer and dowels to the triangle braces. Remember what I said earlier? This gives the two triangle brace panels more stability because the stringer is actually glued to both of the panel pieces. I clamped the smaller stringers to the triangle brace to locate where to drill the pilot holes for the pivot point connecting bolt and the threaded insert for the locking knob. I used a 7/16 inch drill bit for both of these holes. Keep in mind that this drill bit size is not typical, and it doesn't come in most drill bit sets. You'll probably have to purchase this bit individually. I'll leave a link in the description so you can find one easily. This is the correct tool to use when threading in a threaded insert. It's called an Easy Lock drive tool. Do not use a screwdriver because you only have one shot at this, and if you do it wrong, you will ruin your pilot hole and your insert. This insertion has to be exactly straight, so using a drill press is recommended, but you do it by hand cranking it, not actually turning on the motor. You will use your right hand to crank the chuck down while using the left hand to turn the chuck clockwise simultaneously until the insert sits flush or even a hair recessed. And take note, that package says this is for 5/16 inserts. Yes, that's true, but that is referring to the inner diameter and the bolt that goes in it. The insert itself needs a 7/16 drill bit like I mentioned earlier, but they won't tell you that. I might sound really smart explaining all of this, but let me show you how dumb I was. First off, I somehow put the threaded insert in the wrong hole, and that pilot hole crept into the space where the large ladder dowel will be. The misplacement of the threaded insert means that the Pikler Triangle will still fold up, but will be wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. I won't be able to fix that, but I will still be able to insert that dowel. Let me show you how. It was just a simple adjustment of using my Dremel to power sand a cove into the dowel that created a space for that threaded insert to exist in. Lining up all of the holes to not interfere with the dowels was the most challenging part of this project. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. We're ready for the glue up. This was a complicated and detailed process, but if you want to do it right, then it all comes down to prep. I used green frog tape anywhere possible glue squeeze out could occur. I meticulously cut out each of the ladder holes and then used Type-On 2 with my 50-inch Bessie bar clamps to get the job done. Using a dab of epoxy is always a great idea when inserting threaded inserts to make sure they are secure. I forego the epoxy since I knew these inserts would have to contend with the wood glue due to my mistake earlier. As meticulous as I was doing everything I could to prevent a glue squeeze out mess, there was still some dry glue to contend with. I tried using a razor blade until my wife came in and told me about this really cool tool. I thought it was such a great idea that I did an entire video about it. You can click on the link in the top right hand corner if you want to learn more about it. It was a game changer for me. Because I planed the triangle braces to be thinner than the stringers, this made the 35mm M8 pivoting connecting bolt to be too large by a few millimeters. The next size was 30mm and that was too small, so I used my Dremel to cut it down to size and then fine-tuned the length on my belt sander. Sure, I made it a little harder on myself, but I gotta admit, in the end, it just looked a little better, and that's what I was going for. Something real nice. Oh, and by the way, don't do what I did. That bolt really heats up when you're cutting it on a Dremel. Ruined a clamp. Most people just buy locking knobs on Amazon, but what's the fun in that? I decided to make my own, and this is how I did it. And by the way, buying knobs will probably make your kids to turn out to be horrible people. So keep that in mind. There are two wooden parts to the locking knob. I suggest using a scrap piece first to get the sizing just right. Mark out 4 points on a square, then take a large Forstner bit to drill through. You can see that I used a white colored pencil to mark on this dark walnut piece because it's easier to see than a standard pencil. Anytime I drill completely through a piece of wood, I always use backing board to prevent tear out on the backside. And then you just take it over to the bandsaw, cut through those white lines, and you end up with this funky looking 8-sided thingamajigger. For the second wooden part of the locking knob, I used a 2-inch hole saw to cut out a circle, but not all the way through. Just cut about 95% of the way through. Then I followed up with a Forstner bit, slightly larger than the head of the bolt I will be installing very soon, making sure to drill completely through the wood. Then I went back to finish the hole saw cut. If you saw completely through with the hole saw on the first cut, then clamping down on such a small piece can be difficult. I cleaned up all the rough spots with the belt sander and followed up by creating the final shape of the locking knob with the oscillating spindle sander. Off camera I did some hand sanding with 220 grit before putting it all together. With these two pieces of the locking knob now complete, it was a simple matter of adding a little wood glue, clamping them together, and waiting for them to dry. And with the leftover glue squeeze out, I used my nifty little rotary tool that I mentioned earlier. Go check out that video. I'll tell you all about it. I used a 2.5 inch 5/16 bolt and screwed it into the threaded insert and then measured the gap to find out how much to cut off so the locking knob will screw into the triangle bracket without it sticking out. Keep in mind, it's better that the bolt be a hair short than a hair too long. And yes, I used pliers this time. Metal pliers don't melt, thank goodness. To secure the bolt in the locking knob, I used JB Weld quick setting epoxy mixed with walnut sawdust for color matching. I feel it's the little things that matter most. Now, this epoxy sets in 5 minutes and cures in 1 hour. Since this epoxy will have torque pressure applied to it, I didn't want to take any chances, so I just let it sit overnight before even messing with it. Before beginning the finishing process, I used a tack cloth to get rid of all the dust and fine particles that could really ruin a nice finish. My finishing options for this project were limited because it has to be baby safe because it's for a baby. So I chose to use mineral oil, like this one, Howard Cutting Board Oil. It's tasteless, odorless, and basically just mineral oil in a nice bottle. After letting that oil absorb, I wiped it off and followed with Howard Butcher Block Conditioner. This really gives it a soft and silky feel to the touch and overall boosts the final quality of the project, as well as helps the quality of the oil finish to last longer. Just make sure to wait at least 1 hour before wiping it off. You could even leave it overnight if you want. It's fine, it just conditions and then you wipe it off. This project may seem complete, but this video is not. If you are planning on building your own Pikler Triangle, then stick around because right now I'm going to give you all of the juicy details summed up into a few bite-sized chunks that you won't find anywhere else on YouTube in this format. I don't have plans available for download, but this video has the plans right here. So let me quickly review and you can follow along. The stringers are 44 inches long. The shorter stringers are 37 inches long. All of the stringers are 4 inches wide. The ladder dowels are 34 inches long and 1¼ inches in diameter. And don't forget, I accidentally switched the locking knob and the pivot point connecting bolt. And don't forget, the ladder dowels are 6 inches on center, starting at 2 inches from the top. Here are the details for the triangle braces. I'm giving you the layout for this viewpoint. You'll just flip it around for the opposite side triangle brace. The size of the triangle can vary based on your preferences, but let me show you my measurements. Just be aware that your ladder dowel placement can throw everything off, so keep that in mind. This is 11 inches high and 12 inches across. Keep in mind this is after the corners are cut off. All of the angles are 60 degrees. Now let me review the pilot holes. Keep in mind this is the correct plan without my mistakes. The center of the top hole should be placed 1 inch from the top of the triangle brace. The center of the bottom left hole should be 8 inches from the center of the top hole. The center of the middle right side hole should be 5½ inches from the center of the top hole. And the center of the bottom right hole should be 4¼ inches from the center of the middle right hole. These two holes will need a 3/8 inch drill bit. And the pivot point and locking knob holes will need a 5/16 drill bit. Now, I had never heard of this contraption called a Pikler Triangle, and I feel confident my parents were unaware of it too. But if I had one of these when I was a toddler, I bet things could have turned out a little different for me. Maybe I'd be able to jump higher, run faster, be richer. I probably would have been better looking and considered undeniably sexier to all women. Overall, just a better person. But for little Quincy, he'll be starting out life on the right foot, all because he has parents who love him and happen to know an amateur woodworker with some free time, a YouTube channel, and a soft heart for hard wood.